On one side of things, it's really interesting because when we first started this study, it was one of my first ones in my PhD. So looking at self-rated intelligence and perceptions of intelligence. And when we initially looked at that, actually my initial hypothesis was more intelligent people maybe have more cognitive resources, and so maybe they're more likely to be able to overcome this bias. And when looking at this in a pilot study, when I was first brand new PhD student, we found the complete opposite effect. We found that people with higher self-rated intelligence were more likely to have this bias, and that struck me as odd, and so dove into literature and then realized, oh wait, there's a lot of literature saying that intelligent people actually fall short on a lot of different aspects. So in creating a new study, we looked now at actual intelligence rather than self-rated intelligence, and we went into it with a new hypothesis based on what our pilot study was telling us as well as what the literature was telling us, which was basically saying intelligent people often use a lot of mental shortcuts, and this can have consequences on their outcome. I think one way to further expand on this topic would be to look at other perceptions closer. So we're still not really clear on what the mechanism behind our findings are. So it could be a self-similarity bias where more intelligent people were more likely to say that an intelligent face was attractive, perhaps because there's a self-similarity effect, but it could also be an anchoring bias where more intelligent people are more likely to use mental shortcuts like anchoring, and because of that they rely more on their first impression and then come again when they're asked to rate intelligence, then they rate it similarly. So looking at different perceptions like perhaps trustworthiness might be able to differentiate whether it's a self-similarity bias or more of an anchoring effect kind of bias. When we first came out with this study, we did have the areas of education closely in mind, but it's likely to have effects in hiring and employment, perhaps just as much as education. Really, any situation in which first impressions can have consequences. I think to prevent the bias, the first step is really knowing you have a problem, right? So if you know that most people are biased towards attractiveness when looking at perceptions of intelligence, then perhaps you can keep this in mind the next time you're making this kind of perception in a way that might influence the person being observed's behavior in some kind of way, whether that's education or employment.